Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into the recent performance and the future strategy of a major global pharmaceutical company. We've pulled together quite a bit of material, financial statements, R&D updates, the whole picture.
Yeah, and this is really important because it gives us a window into the pressures and, honestly, the big bets happening right now in biopharma. For you listening, this is about understanding that tension. How do you drive record growth but also invest billions in the future when, huge risks are hitting you? Things like pricing reform, big legal battles.
Absolutely. The story for Q3 2025 isn't simple at all. It really is a balancing act. You've got great results now, generating lots of cash.
Record cash flow, really.
Right, record cash flow. But that's being plowed straight back into some pretty ambitious next-gen research. And all this is happening with these big shadows looming U.S. drug pricing changes, this enormous tax fight. It feels like innovation and risk are peaking at the exact same time. Okay, let's start with the numbers, the Q3 scorecard. Overall revenues look strong, right? Up 12% year over year, $9.6 billion.
That's right, $9.6 billion. And the interesting thing behind that number is the mix. Product sales were also up 12%, but almost all of that was volume. Global volume grew 14%, which is fantastic.
14% volume growth is huge.
It is. But look, that growth was partly offset by net selling prices actually dropping by 4%. So what that tells you is commercially they're executing really well, getting the drugs out there, but that price pressure, it's very real.
But even with that pressure, their ability to turn sales into actual free cash flow seems, well, impressive.
Extremely impressive. They generated $4.2 billion in free cash flow just in Q3. That's up quite a bit from $3.3 billion last year. That cash is critical right now.
And what are they doing with it? You mentioned investment.
They're spending it big time. They actually called it a step change increase in R&D expenses themselves.
Yeah.
R&D spending jumped 31% year over year just in this quarter.
Whoa, 31%. For a company this size, that's a massive increase. I mean, is that sustainable? Can they keep that up without hitting margins, especially with the policy risks we need to talk about? Are they maybe gambling too much short-term cash?
Well, I wouldn't call it gambling exactly. It's more like a necessary cost for the future in this business. That surge is very focused. It's mostly on late-stage clinical programs, moving those really expensive trials into phase 3.
Okay. So it's not just speculative early stuff.
No, not primarily.
Yeah.
They're essentially writing the checks now to secure their position down the road in some of the biggest therapy areas. We're talking about MariTide for obesity and cardiovascular, Olpasiran for CV risk, Zelortamig in oncology. These are big bets, yes, but they're bets on the next generation of blockbusters.
Okay, let's shift to what's driving that growth today. Yeah. That impressive 14% volume. Repatha, the cholesterol drug, seems to be on fire. Sales up 40%.
Yeah, 40% year over year, hitting $794 million in the quarter. Just explosive growth.
And how are they managing that? Is there a specific strategy there?
There is, and it's quite bold, actually. Ties into market access. They launched something called Amgen now. It's a direct-to-patient program in the U.S. It makes Repatha available for about $239 a month.
$239 a month. That sounds significantly lower than the list price.
It is, roughly $8 a day. That's nearly 60% below the current U.S. list price. The thinking seems to be, let's remove the cost excuse for patients and doctors, get rid of those prior authorization hassles.
That makes sense for access. But strategically, what else does that do? Does it maybe set a lower price expectation long term?
That's the potential double-edged sword, right? You dramatically lower the patient cost, streamline access, maybe take insurers out of the direct equation a bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, you could be signaling to the market and maybe policymakers that this class of drugs can be offered much cheaper. It's aggressive, maximize volume now, potentially cap the price ceiling later.
Interesting trade-off. Okay, moving on. Bone health. Evenity looks like another strong performer, up 36%.
Yeah, $541 million. Evenity's strength comes from its unique science. It tackles postmenopausal osteoporosis differently. See, most drugs either slow bone loss or maybe stimulate a bit of growth. Evenity is the only one approved that does both.
Both increases formation and decreases resorption.
Exactly. Simultaneously. Think of it like building new parts of a bridge while also reinforcing the existing supports. Because it's unique, doctors feel there's still a lot of potential growth, even though overall treatment rates for osteoporosis are still quite low.
Got it. Then there's inflammation. TEZSPIRE sales jumped 40% too. And didn't they just get a new FDA approval for it?
They did, just in October. A new indication for chronic rhinosinusitis with nasal polyps, CRSWNP they call it, for adults and teens. TEZSPIRE targets something called TSLP, thymic stromal lymphopoietin.
TSLP. That's considered pretty upstream in inflation, isn't it?
Yeah, some call it a master switch or top of the cascade. By hitting that, the idea is you can potentially address a wider range of severe inflammatory conditions. This new nasal polyps indication is a key step in broadening its use.
Makes sense. And the rare disease portfolio overall.
Solid growth, 13% year over year, about $1.4 billion total. Uplizna stood out there, sales up 46%.
Why the big jump for Uplizna?
Part of it was launching in a condition called IG4-related disease. What's interesting is that this is a pretty newly defined rare condition. So the sales bump suggests their efforts to educate specialists are working fast, leading to quicker diagnosis and uptake, finding success in a new niche.
Okay, one last area before we look ahead. Biosimilars. Looks like a mixed bag there.
It is. Pavblu, which is their biosimilar for Eylea, did really well, $213 million in Q3 sales. Apparently, retina specialists really like its pre-filled syringe format. Convenience matters.
But not all biosimilars are hitting it out of the park.
No. AMG Vita, their Humira biosimilar, actually saw sales decrease by 7%. It just highlights that biosimilar success isn't guaranteed. It depends on, the specific drug, how it's delivered, the competitive landscape, payer relationships. It's complex.
All right, let's talk about where that big 31% R&D jump is going, the future pipeline. Let's start back with Repatha, because there's big news there too, right? Beyond just current sales.
Huge news, potentially practice-changing. See, Repatha's initial success was mainly in secondary prevention patients who'd already had a heart attack or stroke. But they ran this massive study, over 12,000 patients, called Vesalius-CV, and it asked the big question, can Repatha prevent the first heart attack or stroke? Primary prevention.
And MAP, the endpoint there, that stands for Major Adverse Cardiovascular Events.
Correct. Usually a composite of things like heart attacks, stroke, certain hospitalizations, or needing procedures like stenting. The really bad outcomes. And the news is, Repatha met both primary MACE endpoints in the trial. No new safety issues either.
Wow. So preventing the first event, how significant is that?
It's massive because something like 75% of heart attacks are first events. So being the first and only PCSK9 inhibitor shown to do this in high-risk patients who are already on statins but still have high LDL cholesterol, that could really change how doctors approach prevention.
When do we see the full data?
It's coming up fast. Presentation scheduled for the American Heart Association meeting, AHA, on November 8th. Everyone's waiting for that. It potentially opens up a huge new patient population.
Okay, now for maybe the biggest financial bet, MariTide, the obesity and metabolic drug. This is such a crowded space now. How are they trying to differentiate?
It's definitely hyper-competitive. MariTide is what they call an antibody-peptide conjugate. It has a dual mechanism, activates the GLP-1 receptor, like some current drugs, but it also antagonizes another receptor, GIPR.
Yeah.
But the key differentiator they keep highlighting isn't just the mechanism, it's dosing frequency.
Less frequent injections.
That's the goal. They're aiming for monthly, maybe even less frequent dosing. That could be a huge advantage for patients, sticking with the treatment.
Definitely. And the clinical program sounds ambitious.
Very. 6 global phase 3 studies running. They're covering weight management in patients both with and without type 2 diabetes, MariTime 1 and 2. And importantly, MariTime CV is looking specifically at cardiovascular outcomes. They want to show benefits beyond just weight loss.
Got it. Next up, olpasiran, targeting something called LPA. Use it as a high conviction target. Why so much confidence in LPA?
It comes down to human genetics, really.
Yeah.
LPA, lipoprotein (i), is this inflammatory particle in the blood, and genetic studies are crystal clear. People born with naturally low levels of LPA just have much lower rates of heart disease. It's independent of their LDL cholesterol. The genetic link is incredibly strong.
Okay, the target makes sense. But they're claiming olpasiran could be best in class. It's an LTI molecule, right? How does that potentially beat competitors? Aren't others working on LPA too?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a contested space, which is why best in class is a bold claim. Olpasiran uses SERMAN technology, short interfering RNA. You can think of it like molecular scissors that go into liver cells and very precisely turn off the switch that makes the LPA particle. It doesn't just block it, it stops production.
So more fundamental.
Potentially, yeah. Their confidence seems based on the specific way their molecule is designed. They believe it allows for less frequent dosing, maybe every few months, and achieves a deeper, more sustained reduction in LPA compared to other approaches. The big phase 3 outcome trials, called OCEAN-A, are underway now to prove that.
Okay, finally in the pipeline, let's touch on oncology. Their BITE platform seems to be really delivering. IMDLTRA had strong sales this quarter.
Yeah, $178 million in Q3, up 33% from the previous quarter. IMDLTRA targets something called DLL3, and the BITE platform itself stands for Bispecific T-cell Engager, is pretty revolutionary.
Remind us how BITEs work again.
Basically, they're like molecular handcuffs. One end grabs onto a specific marker on the cancer cell. The other end grabs onto one of the patient's own immune cells, a T cell. It physically brings the killer T cell right up next to the cancer cell, forcing an attack. Really clever technology.
And the next BITE coming through is xaluritamig.
Correct. Xaluritamig targets a protein called STEAP1. It's moving into phase 3 for advanced prostate cancer, specifically metastatic castrate-resistant prostate cancer, or mCRPC. And they're running big head-to-head trials comparing it directly against current standard therapies. Shows they think it could potentially replace existing treatments.
Okay, so we've seen the growth, the cash, the huge R&D investment in this exciting pipeline. Now let's bring back that tension, the headwinds. The Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, is already having a tangible impact, isn't it?
Absolutely. This isn't theoretical anymore. We're seeing it hit the books. Otezla, their oral drug for psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, got selected for Medicare price negotiation or price setting, really starting in 2027. And that selection immediately forced them to take impairment charges.
And those charges were significant. $400 million just in Q3.
Exactly. And that $400 million, remember, isn't cash lost today. It's the company basically saying, because of this IRA policy, our future expected earnings from Otezla just dropped by $400 million. The total write-down related to Otezla for the first 9 months of 2025 was actually $1.2 billion.
$1.2 billion wiped off the expected value.
Yeah.
And Otezla isn't the only one.
No. ENBREL, another one of their huge sellers, was also selected for Medicare price setting, starting even earlier in 2026. So the impact is real and growing.
Beyond the IRA, there's also just straightforward competition, right?
Right.
Biosimilars are coming for some big products.
Yes. Prolia and XGEVA, both major bone health drugs, are expected to see sales start to erode through the rest of 2025 because biosimilar versions are finally launching in the U.S. market. That's another ongoing pressure.
And then there's this massive IRS tax dispute. Could you break that down? It sounds enormous.
It is potentially enormous. It revolves around how the company allocated profits between its operations in the U.S. and Puerto Rico, going back quite a ways specifically for the years 2010 through 2015.
And the amounts the IRS is seeking are staggering.
They really are. For the 2010-2012 period, the IRS wants $3.6 billion plus interest. For 2013-2015, it's another $5.1 billion plus a $2 billion penalty plus interest. You add it all up, potential liability could be approaching, $11 billion, maybe more with interest. It's a huge number.
That kind of purely regulatory risk seems almost bigger than some of the scientific risks they face.
In financial terms, absolutely. Now, the company is strongly contesting this in U.S. tax court. But a decision isn't expected until the second half of 2026 at the earliest. So until then, this massive potential liability just hangs out there. It definitely affects how they think about capital, maybe future acquisitions, things like that. And on top of all that, you've got lingering uncertainty around other policies too, things like the most favored nations idea, trying to link U.S. prices to international ones, global tariffs potentially increasing costs. It's a complex environment. #tech outro.
So let's try to bring this all together. It's a really dynamic picture. Strong performance now, huge investment in the future, but these significant policy and legal pressures. What's the core takeaway for you, the listener?
I think the key thing to grasp is the split screen. On one side, you have scientific innovation just racing ahead. Look at the Repatha MAC data, the sheer scale and ambition of the MariTide and Olpasiran programs. Science is accelerating. But on the other screen, the business side, the commercial value and the lifespan of existing blockbuster drugs are being directly challenged, even shortened, by policy changes. That $1.2 billion write-down on Otezla because of the IRA is the perfect example. Future value just gone.
It creates this incredible tension for these companies. So here's a final thought for you to consider, building on all this. We see these massive resources pouring into next-gen assets like MariTide, driving that huge 31% R&D spike. At the same time, you have policies like the IRA aggressively reducing the value of proven successful drugs like Otezla. How might this dynamic where the window to make money back on a drug seems to be shrinking because of policy? How might that shape the kind of risks companies are willing to take in the future? Does it change their scientific strategies? Does it make them more conservative or maybe even more desperate for truly massive breakthroughs? Definitely something to mull over as we watch how this complex industry continues to evolve.